What day is it? What year is it? I don't know what's going on.
Don't worry, Brian. You're okay. We can break the binge cycle. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Broken Speaker Podcast. My name is Greg, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Brian. Today, we're going to be talking about something we've all done in some form or another. Brian more recently than others. And that is binge watching TV shows or movie series or however you want to think of it. Have you ever found yourself pressing watch next episode until you don't know what time it is or even what day it might be? Well, then you've been in a binge cycle. Expect us to discuss the upsides and downsides of binge watching shows. But before we get into it, let's go over what we're drinking today. Brian, what do you have?
So today, I am going to Oregon, to the Deschutes Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. And I'm having one of their classics, one of their year-round offerings. It's Mirror Pond Pale Ale. It is a 40 IBU, 5% alcohol, and it's supposed to be just a very typical pale ale. But what I thought was really interesting about this beer, and I just read on the side of this, was they've been family and employee-owned since 1988. And they posted on their bottle, which I knew is a big thing right now in the brewing industry as being, employee-owned. So I think that's really cool that they are able to, put on their bottle and be proud of that fact. But otherwise, I'm very excited about tasting this beer. What about you, Greg? What are you drinking today?
Well, now I'm looking at my bottle first off, and I can't see anything about being family-owned. But regardless, I still think it's going to be a good beer. Today I am drinking Number 9 Not Quite Pale Ale by Magic Hat Brewing Company. They are from Burlington, Vermont, so we are going coast to coast with the beers we've picked today. And I'm not sure exactly what this is supposed to taste like. It says it's sort of dry, crisp, refreshing ale whose mysterious and unusual palate will swirl across your tongue with subtle notes of fruit and floral hop bitterness. So I guess I'll find out as I'm drinking what exactly that means, but so I'm kind of excited, looking forward to it, and So, Brian, I feel the next part is the beer enrichment fact of the podcast. Do you have something for us today?
I do, in fact, have a little bit of a fact that you guys can keep in the back of your mind, and this one's actually for a very specific situation, because before we've gone to Russia with our facts, and last week, where did I do last week, Greg?
You did the iced beer from Canada.
Iced beer from Canada. So I've stayed in a very cold climate, and I think that we need a little bit of warmth. We need to warm up a little bit. So we're going to go down to the islands, and we're going to go down to the cruise destinations. And I know that when you go to the islands, a lot of people think of, tequila or rum. And they think that that's the offerings that these islands have. But I was very surprised to find out that islands like in the Caribbean, like Jamaica and Trinidad, as well as, not so much an island, but I'm thinking more of just south of the border. So Costa Rica, Panama, Belize. These places have a pretty big craft beer culture. Now, they might not be as big as the United States. For instance, Costa Rica makes about 1.4 million U.S. barrels annually. Panama, 1.9 million U.S. barrels annually. The Caribbean is about 2 million barrels. Now, to give you an idea of how big that is, a lot of microbreweries, the larger microbreweries in the United States, are hovering just around 1 million barrels per year. So whereas like a microbrewery like New Belgium might be at 1 million barrels, or they're probably just over 1 million barrels now because of their Asheville brewery that they just opened up, they're probably similar to what this entire country produces in 1 year. And in Costa Rica, what I found was very interesting, there's a dozen craft breweries in Costa Rica. Now, if I went on a cruise and I ended up in Costa Rica, I don't know if I would really think right off the bat, I want to go to a microbrewery. That wouldn't be the first thing that I try. What about you, Greg?
No, it doesn't ring a bell. Now, I'm not the best at geography, but from what I understand, isn't Costa Rica kind of small?
It's tiny. And so the fact that it has, this 12 dozen or so craft brewery startups in such a small country, and they're making 1.4 million barrels for this small country, it's very interesting. But something that this, and again, I'm reading all these numbers from the Atlas of Beer by Holst, Poland, and Patterson, the book that we've been using over the last few weeks. But the fact that I thought was interesting was that almost all the beer that they produce in these small countries is consumed in the small countries. So you're rarely going to find beers from these places in the U.S. You have to go there to drink them. One of the main reasons is, getting them off the island and shipping them to the mainland is expensive. So it doesn't make sense. So if they're making 1.4 million U.S. barrels, it's being consumed there on that island. And it's very interesting to me is that there's just so much beer being consumed in a place where you think of, tropical fruity drinks on the island, sitting on a beach. You wouldn't just think of craft beer. So there's my enrichment fact of the week. Next time you go on a cruise, don't just sit there. Don't go to the bar and order your Mai Tais or your pina coladas or your margaritas. Look for craft beer, local craft beer. It's out there, and it's waiting to be tried by all of you.
That sounds delicious. I think I can definitely take it away when I inevitably do go on cruises to tropical countries, because that is definitely in my future. I will definitely be trying the craft beer.
Perfect. And that's what it's all about. That's what craft beer culture is about, is just trying it in new places and trying new things. If you don't, you might never have that beer again, but you know what? You can say you tried it. So let's get back to the main topic right now. And I think the perfect place to start with this is, let's say, Greg, so let's do the most recent show that I finally caught up on. I binged was Westworld from HBO. And we'll talk about it a little bit more afterwards. But you watched this when it came out, correct?
Yes. So Westworld, released by HBO, and HBO typically does releases once a week for a season, as they do with Game of Thrones and Westworld. But I watched it as it was being released. So every week on Sunday, I believe it was, I would watch a new episode and catch up with the story, and then have to wait for 1 week until I could watch the next episode. Now, since you didn't watch it when it was being released, you watched every episode whenever you wanted, as long as you wanted for. So you potentially binged it in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How long did it take you?
It took me about 2 weeks. But I think the biggest thing is that since you watched it, probably over a year ago now, you have been telling me that I should watch it because it was an incredible show. But you did not give away any spoilers. Now, I know that spoilers is a big thing for any show, especially if someone's waiting to catch up or they don't have the time to watch it as it's being released. But here's the question is, when can you have an open discussion without putting out a spoiler alert to your friends? Because when a lot of people watch it as it comes out. And when you're at work and you might be a little bit behind on a show or you haven't watched that part yet, you have to make sure that you don't get caught in those conversations or near those conversations because you don't want to ruin it. But I think a lot of people, it reaches a point where you don't know, or like if you haven't watched it at that point, then you are out of luck. Like, you're going to hear spoilers and it's your fault because you haven't caught up. What's your thoughts on that, Greg?
So personally, in my opinion, it depends on every situation. So if I'm in a work group and we sit down at lunch and we're all talking about a TV show that came out, 3 months ago, and we look around the table, usually I go, okay, has everybody seen this? And if someone says no, then I say, okay, we'll avoid any spoilers. Because if they're okay with it, they'll say no, but, I'm okay listening to any of the spoilers. I don't really think I'm going to watch that show. Or they might say no, and I'm going to plan to watch it here in the next, month or so. So please avoid any spoilers. So you kind of take the common courtesy to ask. And if anybody tells you, like, oh, that movie is 16 years old and I'm going to watch it tomorrow, so don't spoil it, then, it's kind of free game at that point. Anytime over a couple of years, it's free game.
Okay. Yeah, no, but I will say one thing is that just like that situation that you just said was, you say like, hey, is anybody watching this? And someone goes, yeah, no, I'm going to watch it tonight. The worst thing that you can do then is say, okay, no spoilers, and then turn to someone who has watched and said, didn't that blow your mind last night?
So tease them. You mean you can't tease them?
I think it's one of the worst things that you can do because it makes you just start thinking about it. And then, like, it might be like an interesting little thing that happened, but it might not be mind-blowing, and you're going to ruin the episode because you're going to be searching for that thing and try to catch it before it happens. Like, you're going to see everything that leads up to it, and it might just be like, oh, they ran into so-and-so. Like, it might not even be that groundbreaking, but in your mind, you're like, they were so intent on talking about it. I need to find out what it was. I need to know. And it almost ruins the show for you. Like, you want to find those surprises without being prompted.
Okay, so that's your personal opinion. In my personal opinion, I think I'm going to go in the opposite direction and say, as long as you avoid the plot points and you keep it super vague, who cares? If they're listening in, they're obviously going to spoil it for themselves. If you turn around to the other way and you're talking to someone else, that's their fault. You know, you gave them the warning and said, hey, okay, we're going to talk about it over here, but don't listen in. They're over listening on your conversation and whatever. Now, if you're looking at the person and say, oh my gosh, you're going to lose your crud today, you're going to go crazy at the twist that happens, then okay, yeah, it gets a little bit rude, I guess you could say. But in my opinion, I mean, as long as you keep it vague and don't actually give away any spoilers, how harmful could it really be? Have you had a lot of situations where someone spoils it in that method and you get totally peeved?
I think it was partially the internet and partially people, but I think this was about 3 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, I finally decided to catch up on Game of Thrones, and I needed to watch like 5 or 6 seasons all at once, and I was watching it while the newest season was coming out. I ended up like catching up halfway through the newest season that was coming out, and there were spoilers all over the internet. People were talking about it, and because Game of Thrones is such a long series, there's characters that are in the first season that were not in the later season. So they would reference a character's death or something like that. And they're like, oh, that happened like 3 seasons ago. And that was the season that I was working on. So like, I probably did it to myself. I think my personal opinion is that the only way to be safe, the only way to actually save yourself from any horrors of spoilers is to catch up on it on time in a reasonable effort. And to, when you're at work and people are having those conversations, or if you really are worried about that, put on your headphones, keep your head down, don't get on social media. Like, I feel, as I agree with you, like, people should be courteous, but they don't need to go out of their way. It's kind of your own job to keep yourself spoiler free, not overhear conversations or something like that.
Exactly. And I mean, when it comes to Game of Thrones, that's a little bit more difficult because it is such a global phenomena and everybody is talking about it. So you're not going to be able to escape it just by not listening to your coworkers. It's all over the internet, and people on the internet are the worst about spoilers, so you're never going to avoid it.
Agreed. But inevitably, you are going to have to binge watch some shows, because you're going to look at a show and be like, I didn't really think that was that interesting of a concept, but then everybody's saying it's awesome, so you're going to watch like 2 or 3 episodes more and be like, oh wow, this is awesome. So you're going to end up binging before the next season starts, and that's what I did with the Westworld. Because the new Westworld season is coming out in March or sometime this spring. So I decided to finally catch up on it. And, I was like, wow, I can't believe that I ever wrote this off before. Like, I really am enjoying the show. But the binge has been around for a while. So I don't know where it started, though, because I feel like when people say binge watching, they think of HBO, they think of Hulu, they think of Netflix nowadays. They don't think of, back before those times. But I would argue that there has been binge watching even before Netflix or Hulu or HBO. Would you agree, Greg?
Now, I'm trying to think of a specific example of binge watching before any of those streaming services and online streaming. And yeah, you're right, there might be examples of it. But I feel it has really come to prominence as a result of the advent of digital streaming and all of this online video that is available today. So to your example, I'm thinking of, I don't know, maybe you go to a Blockbuster in 1995 or whenever Blockbuster was around, and you look for...
R.I.P. Blockbuster.
Yes, rest in peace. You were sorely missed. Not really. But you go to Blockbuster, you find a TV show that you're interested in watching. I guess you could get the whole TV show on videotape or even DVD when those were coming out, and you could watch the whole TV show at once. you had maybe a day to watch the entire thing because you had it, so you'd get it over the weekend and binge watch the whole show, I guess, is what you were thinking of?
So, yes, you can. That was what I was kind of thinking of, but I would argue that it would be channels like TBS, and they would, right before, like, let's go back to the 90s, Friends. Right before the new Friends season comes out, the weekend before, they decide that starting Friday night at like 5 o'clock, they're going to have every Friends episode in order, starting with season 1, episode 1. And they are going to start it, they're going to go till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. And then they're going to start again at 9 o'clock in the morning. So they're going to do 12 hours straight of Friends. Well, people who are diehard Friends viewers, maybe they don't have the shows on videotape. Maybe they can't get it from Blockbuster or something like that. So if they want to catch up and they want to kind of look at everything sequentially and be ready for that new season on Monday when it comes out, Monday night, they have to sit in front of the TV all weekend for 12 hours. And I think people did that. Now, I was born in the 90s, so I was young, but I remember seeing these things, and I know that they do it still nowadays. They'll do a movie marathon, or they'll do a TV show binge marathon or something on AMC. Like, the one that I see the most is The Walking Dead. AMC always does The Walking Dead, like, leading up into the brand new seasons. They always binge basically from season 1, episode 1. Now, I think that Netflix and HBO have made it more accessible for all of us to do it, and I think that, yes, the definition of binge has switched from watching it all day because you have to watching it all day because you're addicted to it. But I would even argue that you could binge the Star Wars films.
Yes, I that's very near to my heart. You struck a heart chord there, Brian. Binging
I knew that was going to get to you. I knew that was going to get to you. That's why I said it. But, and I didn't know that we did this before, back in college while we were supposed to be studying for finals, you and I would, while we were studying, throw on Star Wars, starting with, episode 1, the true episode 1, and we would watch all of the, the movies.
Okay, pause 1 second. You said true episode 1. Which one is true episode 1?
Well, episode 1 would be the 4th movie made, true episode 1. Like, you got to do it in order.
Okay.
You can't start, at episode 4.
All right. I see where the line was drawn. Okay, continue.
That's a whole different thing. If we need to have a Star Wars episode,
completely different argument.
And you have very strong feelings about Star Wars, whereas I'm kind of a part-time Star Wars enthusiast. You know every backstory and all that stuff, so we'll argue about that on a different podcast at a later date. But back to my thing was, you can do it with movies. I mean, you can even say Indiana Jones. You could even say the Harry Potters or the Lord of the Rings. Any of these movies that have multiple stages or multiple movies, multiple storylines and stuff like that, you can watch all of them. And that would be considered binging. In my mind, the concept of binging, the definition of binging nowadays is watching it because you want to, in a direct order. Now here's the question. If I watch, episode 1 and episode 2 of Star Wars, is that considered a binge?
In my opinion, no. I mean, it's just watching 2 movies in one day. That's not really a binge watch. Binge watch is where you're watching it for a goal, I think. And the goal would be to watch the entire season in a short amount of time. So I guess the most recent example I could come up with was over the winter break. I was at home and I happened to get the entire Blu-ray set of Harry Potter given to me as a gift for Christmas. Now, I've watched all of the Harry Potters before, and because I got the entire set, I made it a goal to watch all of them again over a short period of time. So I binge-watched all of the Harry Potters over, give or take 3 days. So on the first day, I watched 1 or 2 episodes, or not episodes, 1 or 2 of the movies. And then the second day, I think I watched 3, and then last day watched 3 or 4, depending on how many there are, and finished them up. So that was the binge. The binge wasn't the first day of watching just a couple movies. The binge was the entire event of watching the entire season. So you gotta give it kind of a guideline of binge watching is watching the whole season back to back, whether it's over a long stretch of time of just a week or, a couple days, however that works out.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I would agree with you, because if I'm trying to catch up on a season, like Westworld was something, I watched like 2 episodes in a day, and then I'd watch 3 episodes in a day, then I'd watch 1 episode in a day. None of those days did I feel like I was binging on it, but because I finished the entire season, so 10 hours of watching this in 2 weeks, I felt like, I agree with you. It was a binge.
Okay, now, so we've kind of covered exactly what a binge is and how we have encountered it in our modern society. The question I feel like is going to be the meat of this podcast is really, what do you prefer? Binge watching a show in a week and watching every episode back to back, or watching a show on a release schedule where once a week you get a new episode? Now, I personally have been on, I guess you could say, in favor of the weekly release schedule. As if Westworld was releasing a new season, I would watch every episode on Sunday or whenever I can get to it that week, and then watch the next episode the next week, and not have the ability to binge watch every episode in a short period of time. I know some people wait until the end of a series and save up all the episodes and then watch them all at once. I don't think I could ever do that, but in my opinion, I think watching them once a week for the durations of the season is kind of where it's most interesting. And the reasoning behind that, in my opinion, is because it's a cultural phenomena. So you're experiencing this TV show at the exact same rate that everybody else in the world or the country is experiencing the TV show as well. And because of that, you can go to work the next day and say, hey, did you watch last night's episode? And everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to be specific about it. You don't have to be that. Everybody is kind of on the same page. And even online, realistically, you get that feeling. Now, when it comes to other TV shows, like, I guess the most recent example would be Stranger Things Season 2 that was released. It came out every episode at once, and you could watch the entire thing in a day, and then it was done. And so there was a bunch of hype to build up to the season, because the first season was pretty great, and it was kind of unexpected. But the second season was hyped up for a couple years now, and when it finally came out, you watched it in a day and it was done. And you go to work the next week and you ask, hey, did you watch the season? And everybody's like, yeah, I watched it. And I was like, oh, yeah, it was pretty good. And that's it. That's 1 week. That's one show. And that's all you get from it. So from those two examples, that's my opinion. Brian, what do you think?
So I think that, how do I want to put this? I think that the binge can be used on those kind of episodes in a positive way. But I do agree with you. In the core of my beliefs, I do like being able to watch 1 episode a week without it actually having to, like, it all comes out at once. I like it coming out 1 episode a week so that you can kind of think about it and get excited again for the next episode. Like, I like that anticipation. I think that's why we all watch TV shows, is the anticipation. And I think that, like Game of Thrones, we'll watch it on Sunday, and then you know that the next episode's coming out next Sunday. You'll talk about it on Monday and Tuesday. You probably won't talk about it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but Saturday and Sunday, leading up until the next episode, you are talking about it again, trying to remember. You might even watch the last episode again to try to get ready for the new episode coming out Sunday night. Now, I am a personal believer of rewatching the previous season before the new season comes out, because I think that sometimes when you watch the season back to back to back to back, you do get a more clear image of the entire storyline, everything that's going on, because you catch the little things. So you might notice that oh wow, that's why they did that, or that's why that happened. Even though it might not make a big difference, it's like little Easter eggs they leave in there, continuity Easter eggs in the episodes that you might not catch if you watch it, once a week and then the next week, because so much stuff happens in between, you might not catch that. So I like both, but I do agree when it's new episodes, I like the hype, I like the excitement, I like it coming out once a week, or at a slower pace other than all at once, because that's, to me, the excitement that leads up to an episode is what I crave. That's what I'm addicted to. And I don't think that watching it a brand new season all at once gives you that. It's like watching a movie that was like 10 hours long. Once it's done, it's done.
So on that point, realistically, if we're talking about Game of Thrones here, for the release schedule, sometimes having a weekly release schedule and a seasonal release schedule can have some pitfalls. And so what I mean by that is essentially every week for the latest season to come out, there was the potential that piracy was going to occur, a leaked episode was going to come out, and halfway through the week, people could watch the newest episode that would be coming out next Sunday online. And if you go to places like Reddit and the Game of Thrones subreddit, chances are more than half of those people had seen the leaked episode, and they couldn't constrain themselves to wait until Sunday or whatever. They didn't have the patience. And they're going to talk freely about any of the spoilers in the next episode. And so if you take the mighty and righteous high road and wait until Sunday to watch it on the proper platform without piracy and streaming leaked episodes, then you're going to have basically the pitfall of, I can't go on Reddit for the week because spoilers are there. Now, if you go the pirate route and, you just watch the episode because you can, then no harm, no foul, I guess. Well, technically harm, foul. I'm not advocating piracy in this instance, but it's definitely an option and a route that some people have pursued. And realistically, you're just going to watch the show early. You're going to get the same experience out of it, and you're going to be able to talk about it earlier than everybody else. So there are some pitfalls to the weekly streaming schedule.
I think that a lot of people who do the piracy route, they are looked down upon, though, by the rest of the world, the rest of society that are watching this show. It's like, come on, man, contain yourself. Because I think that a lot of people like the lead up. And these pirates are... Now, these people who are doing the piracy, they may, they may get excited for ruining it for people. Maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. But I think that... and the other thing that you got to worry about when you're listening to, people are like, oh, I watched the pirated version. It came out, 2 weeks prior to the season opening release date. Well, yeah, they may have done that, or they may just be lying, because not everything you read on the internet is true. And I know that there was a lot of things with this last Game of Thrones season where people made up facts. So it almost makes it more stressful. I agree with you. You can't go on Reddit. You can't go and see these things, because it makes it more stressful. Because one, you might see what actually happens. Someone has watched it. And two, you have to decide whether or not this person's being, honest about what's going on, and is it going to ruin the entire show for you? Or did they just rickroll you and catch you?
Yeah, so you open the post on Reddit with all the spoilers, and all of a sudden Rick Astley comes playing on in the background.
Yeah.
Never gonna give you... Yeah, okay. I can see that happening. But so moving on from, I guess, the topic of shows that can't contain themselves and get leaked episodes, there are some shows out there that don't have a seasonal release schedule that do manage to release all the episodes at once, but you don't have to binge them. And so some of you probably already know what I'm talking about here, but the latest season of Black Mirror that released, all the episodes came out at once. But the way the show is set up, the episodes are connected only in the universe that they share. It's a collection of short stories, or well, they're not really short. Each episode's about an hour long. But I think the technical term is an anthology show. And so it's a standalone drama each episode. And the story is self-contained. You can watch it for an hour, turn it off, and you don't have to sit there and watch the next episode because you're wondering what happens to so-and-so character. Everything is nice and tidy and wrapped up and stuff like that. So it's not that every show that releases on a binge watch schedule, or every episode comes out at once, you don't have to sit down and watch every episode in a row. Some shows have managed to release every episode and still be something you can watch one episode this week, another episode next week, and then kind of pace it out so that you get better enjoyment from the entire series as a whole.
Yeah, and I think Black Mirror is a perfect example of that, and I think that Netflix probably understands that those shows work well in that format, even though there's no Netflix show that is released once a week, is there?
Now, this might be an oddball. I think there's a show by David Letterman that's come out recently, and it's called My Next Guest Is, and it's a Netflix special, but only one episode is released right now, and I think there are plans for more episodes to come out. So it's being produced and filmed like a normal seasonal TV show, and because of that, it's coming out on a release schedule. So like this first episode, he's talking with Barack Obama, and so he kind of just talks with him for an hour or so. And then at the end, he teases that his next guest is, I don't know the name of the guy. I can picture his face in my head. But anyways, so he teases his next guest, and he basically shows that they probably already have it recorded, but it's not released yet. So there is a mix here and there. I don't know if that's the best example because it's kind of a different format, but it is coming out on a different pattern than just every episode at once.
Yeah, and I think that, but I think that's the thing, is that all these different companies that are doing the release, they're trying to find the perfect format. Because I think Netflix was one of the first, HBO started as a TV before they were streaming. Like they started as a TV channel. And so it naturally set them up to release their shows on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. Netflix started as a streaming site, or started as a DVD, like a mail DVD, but mail you the DVD so you can watch it. But then their website was just all streaming. So, they would put up the whole movie. They'd put up the whole series of movies. They'd put up the whole series once they created. I feel like both of those, mediums went their expected route for how they started. But they're probably taking a look internally and saying, how can we make this better? So Netflix, they might make more of those anthology shows. Whereas, because people like that it doesn't force them to binge all the time, and they may start looking at releasing episodes like the My Next Guest Is with the David Letterman, where they release it maybe not once a week, but they release it every so often to build a little bit of hype up for it. But I think that's the main thing, is that it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing, because this is all very new to us, because the current concept of binge probably is, I don't know, last 10 years maybe is when the new concept has been born.
I think the technical term of binge watching a TV show has come out in the last few years, but I could do some fact checking on that. I'm not entirely certain.
And I don't think it really matters. I just think that it's new, and these companies are trying to figure out how to do it. Now, on that topic, there's other companies out there that are, looking into this as well, like Hulu, and even, some of the TV channels. I think I just saw, and I might be wrong with this, but I think that ABC is producing a TV show that right now they're not actually showing on ABC, they're showing it online. I might be wrong with this, but they said go and watch the new episodes online, but they didn't have a time that the show is actually being shown on TV. But they may be looking at it too. Another company that's looking into it is our great overlord, Amazon.
Oh, dear God.
Well, no, a couple days ago, one of our shows came out, and they come out on a weekly basis. The Grand Tour.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even think about it. That was the most obvious thing in the world.
But Amazon obviously has decided that the once a week kind of keep people coming back for more throughout the entire season works. And I haven't watched any other shows on Amazon, but I know that you watched Man in a High Castle a little while ago, or you watched some of it.
Yeah, I watched up to the latest season, and there was a new season that was coming out, so I binge watched it. I didn't watch it as it was releasing, and I don't know how the show was actually being released.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering, because I haven't watched it either. I've only watched the Grand Tour on Amazon, so I don't know if they do a little bit of a mix of both. But I know for the Grand Tour, at least, they're releasing it once a week, and I don't even know. I think their seasons are like 10 or 12 episodes. So, but it keeps people coming back for 2 or 3 months. So Amazon's obviously, put their chips on that one. Whether or not that's going to be the trend, I don't know. But Amazon tends to, they're trendsetters. They're the ones that usually figure everything out. So I would bet that more shows start doing this once a week scheduling, because it kind of sounds like both you and I agree, Greg, that the once a week is our more preferable format.
There you go, Brian. Keep sucking up to Jeff Bezos. Eventually he'll make your cult official.
I can't wait till I get my free Amazon shirt. That's really what I'm working for here, is eventually I want a free Amazon shirt. I will frame that somewhere. It doesn't have to even be signed by him, but if I can get some free swag out of this, then my goal is complete. I'll move on to the next company.
If that's what will end the cult of Amazon, you might just be getting a package in the next few weeks from me.
Is it really that bad? I think that I've been pretty creative when I've been adding everything in here.
No, it's not that bad. It catches me off guard. I'm not thinking about it. You definitely didn't bring it up this week, that's for sure.
All right, Greg. I think we have made it to the end of this topic, and it's that time in the episode for last call. So what are your last call on this topic?
Well, starting with the beer that I have been drinking, it's basically gone. I've got a sip left. I'll finish it before you finish your last call. And it was a good beer. Not my favorite, but still easy drinking. A little bit of hints of fruit, kind of refreshing. But so that's the beer. That was good. Moving on to the topic, if we talk about binge watching, I think you got to take everything in moderation. In my opinion, binge watching, yes, it happens. I do it more than I really should. It keeps me up at night and prevents me sleeping all the way through the night on work nights. But I think that you should probably control yourself better and watch one episode a week. That's my opinion. It makes everything better. Now, Brian, what are your last call thoughts?
So, first off, going back to my beer, I'm done with my beer, and it was delicious. I really did like it. It was a very simple beer. It was clean. It was crisp. I could drink that any time of the day, any day of the year, with any weather, and enjoy it. So, if you guys are out in Oregon or anywhere and you see Mirror Pond Pale Ale, definitely give it a shot. And speaking of the beers, Greg and I will be uploading our photos, and I'll be writing a little bit of stuff on our blog about both the beers in our latest De Beers post. And because it is Super Bowl week, and when this podcast gets posted, it'll be a couple days before the Super Bowl, I am going to write a special post that you guys should all check out that has, looking at the beers coming from both Philadelphia and the New England area, just to kind of get us all in the mindset of those two cities going against each other. So we'll look at it from the beer aspect, and maybe you guys can have a couple of those beers at your Super Bowl party. That's another topic. I'll be posting that coming out shortly. As for binge watching, I agree with you, Greg. I think that moderation is key, and I think that if they were creating the seven deadly sins today, there would be an eighth deadly sin, and that would be binge watching TV shows, because people get sucked down a hole and they spend way too much time. I personally can say that I have missed responsibilities because I was binge watching a TV show instead. So I think moderation is key. I think that I definitely, while I would watch all of the shows all at once, I like watching a single episode a week and getting that excitement over and over again.
Wow, Brian, that took a dark turn there.
Yeah, it was a little dark. Maybe we should just keep it a little bit lighter. I don't know. I feel like, I do feel scummy when I binge watch an entire TV show in not in a 2-week period, but in a 2-day period. I wake up the next day and be like, wow, I could have spent my time in much better ways. But I don't think that it's the worst thing every once in a while. But like you said, moderation, I think, is the key to anything, and I think including TV shows.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining this episode of the Broken Speaker Podcast. If you'd like to check out more of our content, go to our blog at www.brokenspeakerpodcast.com. And for anything else, Broken Speaker, check it out. Thanks for joining. Bye.